attack, fast fatal heart impact, past painful scars. In fact, I blast tasteful bars and packs. I back up my actions, fact don't ask, grab reactions, jacked attack with every word, then act with class as they hear me snap. I got nothing to lose, cause I fought and felt the bruise. Now I'm not the one confused, call the shots and they produce. I ain't lost, I'm finally loose, pick a new silver excuse. I need the views to boost me to a new abuse of being used. Everybody wants a piece now, y'all can rest in peace now. You're dead to me, so peace out. Remember, you're discreet out. Get ready for defeat now.
War. War is the most basic human nature. It is rage, greed, anger, and violence. Humans know these emotions well. They know all of them well. The ugly part of reality is a man's truest nature, and it has taught me many things. One of being which that fear has two meanings. Fear everything and run. Or my favorite, face everything and rise. Hello everybody. This is Kirusho here, and as you can tell by the intro, I may have given away what Horseman Midoriya is. Now, I understand that I'm adding another series and some people might not like that, however others might enjoy it, but I've thought about doing this series for quite a bit of time, and I've hit a little bit of writer's block with the Punisher series. There are many different things I can do with that series, but they'd be just too sudden, or they'd just be might sound like a cop-out. Either way, I'm hoping that this might be able to help knock loose a few things. Now, first off the bat, I am removing some of the powers of the Horseman of War, since you do have things like blood manipulation, and a few others, which actually do make him a bit too OP. These powers can be their own what-ifs already. But that's just it. I would allow them to be their own, so I am removing them. Along with that, let us begin. The Horsemen of the Apocalypse. How do they come to Earth? Whenever the fourth seal was broken of the seven, the Horsemen of the Apocalypse, their bodies, the ones that were already on Earth, they were simply awakened and told to get to work, told that this is now the beginning of the end. However, their bodies, they were old. They were too useless. So, they had to die. That alone set them back. Not only did it mean that they would be reborn, but they would have to begin to train their abilities again to what they have. If they are going to take on another human host or a human body, this would signify that they would forget and be separated. So it would probably be a long time until they were to meet again. Now, let us skip to an unknown amount of time later, to the birth of Izuku Midoriya. Whenever he is born, he looks like a perfectly normal, healthy baby boy. And there was nothing strange about that. The doctors were actually surprised. Inko seemed to have a harder time, so they may have thought that he may have had a mutation or something. But that was just it. Izuku Midoriya. After he was born, he began to grow. He always felt different. He just didn't know how. He always wondered, what would be his quirk? Quirk, that's it. And this is whenever, after Midoriya's body began to get stronger, he began to manifest and awaken some of these abilities, not quirks. Midoriya began to awaken the ability of fire, or combustion. Midoriya can look at or make contact with an object, and it will either immediately just explode and go up in flames, or Midoriya can just light it on fire. It's basically like almost incinerating something in an instant. And this was actually quite shocking. Midoriya was impressed and amazed, unaware as to why his quirk, as he thought it was so strong. And this is whenever one day he went to the quirk doctor and learned a bit more about it. It is quite fascinating and quite odd. Midoriya's quote-unquote quirk seems to be very different. They believe that they can classify it as some sort of strange mutation. They're not too sure how it changed and affected his body, but he also does not have that extra joint in his toe to show that he has developed his quirk. However, that's just it. Whatever sort of mutation it caused in Midoriya's body, they believe that this is the reason why it didn't affect his toe joint. They believe that there are other factors, and they would like to study it more. Now, Inko does allow this, and Midoriya does begin to have a bit of research done on him. And this goes on for a few weeks. Along with that, you do have Midoriya at school. He's showing off his ability, trying to get better at it and understand it. Bakugo, he would awaken his quirk roughly around, a few days later, let's say. And him and Midoriya would quickly become friends, similar quirks, as they think. Along with that, Midoriya, he began to show off one day another one of these abilities. And the reason why he didn't realize what it was because everyone just began to get angry at him. He began to show off an ability called rage manipulation. He can manipulate somebody's emotions, and he can't control it very well, unaware as to this ability itself. One day people just started acting aggressive towards him, and Midoriya didn't understand. Even the teachers began to get angry at him and act up. He was unaware as to why. Why was everyone being so mean? And eventually he did get home. And it seemed just to be the same thing there. Hisashi would come home from work, and he would seem angry. However, so would Inko. And the two began to fight. Bakugo was still Midoriya's friend. However, he still did seem to retain that aggressive personality. And this didn't really seem to bother Midoriya. Bakugo was aggressive, yes, but usually it's sort of just the way he talks. Bakugo, he does try to at least get along with Midoriya, but he always did seem just more hostile. And Midoriya didn't understand it sometimes. There were days whenever this ability wouldn't affect people as much. And Midoriya didn't understand it. Now, you also do have one thing that does happen. Eventually there is physical violence. Anytime Midoriya goes anywhere, if he walks past somebody in a crowd, they will begin to feel violent urges. They will either feel like they want to smash something, or hit someone, cause physical harm to another person. Midoriya and Inko would go to a mall one day, and after walking through a crowd, there was a suspected villain attack. Somebody just began to use their quirk to fight somebody. and they caused quite a lot of damage. There wasn't many things known about it, let alone as to what happened. Midoriya was confused by it. A villain here in a public place? Why? It just didn't make sense. Until eventually you have one day. Whenever this strange occurrences around Midoriya began to somewhat affect his home life. Inko would either be constantly angry or somewhat have violent thoughts and urges. And well, she's been trying to get help. Nothing has been helping her with what she's trying to do. And Midoriya, he doesn't understand it. He's tried talking with his mom and asking her questions, wondering if he is supposed to be a hero. Since it feels like anytime he goes anywhere, these things happen. Asking his mom a question. Is there something wrong with him? To which she would tell him no, there is not. And that he is simply just, well, perfectly fine. Now, roughly a few months later, what does happen? Midoriya, he is messing around with his quirk one day, and this is after school. It seems like these strange occurrences around him have gone down. People have gotten less violent. They still do act aggressive, but it's been getting, well, it's been slowly going down. And Midoriya, he's actually quite happy. It feels like things have gone somewhat back to normal. His life does seem pretty good. And he is almost at the age of 5 years old. Now, this is actually going to be roughly about a week before his birthday. Midoriya, he's having fun and watching videos on the computer. Along with that, he's looking up different types of heroes. Fire heroes, All Mights, and other ones. Trying to find out if his quirk is similar to any one of them. Now, Midoriya does eventually find some heroes. A small list that he does actually somewhat write down. And think to himself, he can become a really good pro one day. He can be special, he can be the #1 hero. It would be awesome, it would be amazing. But, well, tragedy began to strike. Another one of Midoriya's abilities began to awaken. And it awakened violently. Whenever Midoriya was sitting down for dinner with his mom, he actually was told to simply do one thing. He was told to go get something to drink. And he did. As soon as he got up from the table and walked into the kitchen, he got a glass of water. As soon as he did come back, he brushed his arm, accidentally hit his mom's elbow. And he fell onto the ground. He didn't mean to, but he accidentally spilled the water onto the ground and slipped too. And his arm did actually fly out and smash into the chair. As soon as that happened, he was on the ground somewhat crying. And Inko quickly got up. And basically got onto her knees and grabbed Midoriya to make sure he was okay. As soon as she actually did wrap her arms around him to pick him up, this ability, well, its effect began to show. Inko, for some reason, began to get incredibly angry and basically go crazy. For an entire second, she saw what her baby boy would become. She saw him turn into the Horseman of War. A mighty, mighty killer. In armor, riding a horse of fire, slaughtering the innocents, and simply burning everything in his wake. She could understand for one complete minute what this would do, and she knew what she had to do. In order to protect humanity, she would have to murder her own child. And she knew that Hisashi would not accept that. So, as soon as she was able to get to her feet, she began to walk into the kitchen without saying a single word. Hisashi trying to make sure Midori is okay. He thinks that Inko is simply going to go get a towel to dry him off. Something to help him. However, she comes back with a knife. And as Hisashi is basically making Midori wipe his tears away, this is whenever she stabs Hisashi directly in the back. And he lets out a very loud scream. As soon as she does pull the knife back out, Hisashi turns around and tries to calm his wife down. Her beginning to scream crazily that he is going to murder people, he is going to be a villain. And Hisashi told Midoriya to lock himself in the bathroom, simply just run. And Inko began to try using her quirk. She tried to use her quirk to grab Midoriya. As soon as she did reach out and try and pull him back towards her, Hisashi immediately grabbed her by her wrist, threw her arm up, and tried to throw her against the wall to fight her, trying to save their son. However, with her other hand with a knife, she just stabbed down into his shoulder, and he began to scream. Meanwhile, Midoriya has run into the bathroom, and he locked the door, trying to hide in the bathtub. Now, with that, this commotion that he's hearing a lot of things being thrown around the room, and he actually does hear a spark, assuming that that was his father's quirk. Now, eventually, someone does hear all this commotion. They thought that it was a simple fight. However, after people began to scream over and over again, eventually the cops were called. And they did have to bust open the door since no one was answering it. The sight they see is quite gruesome. The couch is on the other side of the room, the kitchen table, and the food on it is thrown around the floor. And there is a very big puddle of blood covering a man, who currently has at least a few dozen stab wounds in his body. And then there is Inko, who's just simply smashing on the door, trying to get Midoriya to open it, over and over again, screaming at him that he needs to open this door. Open the door now. And the cops do actually see her. As soon as she does turn around, they instruct her to drop the knife. And she tries to explain it. Her baby boy is a monster. Her baby boy is a monster. He's going to kill people. He is going to become something bad. And well, Inko gets tased. As soon as she does drop onto the ground, they rush in to cuff her. As soon as they put handcuffs on her, she is taken away. And well, Midoriya does open the door, sobbing, unaware as to what his mother was doing. And as soon as he does open the door, he does see his father's body. And it just makes him start crying more. After this does happen, you have Inko. They tried to evaluate her. Her mental state, it was off the charge. Her brain activity was either messed up completely or seemed completely different to a normal person. They just assumed that she went entirely off the rail for no reason. And they were able to just simply categorize it as madness. And she was taken away. She was locked up in a mental institution. And these specific orders were to never allow that woman out of either a pair of handcuffs or out of a padded cell. If they do, she would try and go after her own child and kill him. Meanwhile, you do have Midoriya. After this strange incident, it left him scarred. He was unaware as to what to even try and process this information. Not only did he almost get put into a foster home, but he was also given a counselor, someone who can help him process everything that happened. Now, as the Horseman of War, Midoriya is still confused. He's unaware as to his true powers. He just simply thinks that everything around him he touches or is around dies, or people just, well, tear themselves apart. Unaware as to what to even call himself. Now, Midoriya began to develop wrong. He developed the idea that he just needs to stay out of things. He doesn't want people to get violent, so he should isolate himself. And the counselor began to at least try and talk to him, try and get him to think differently. That isn't the right solution. Isolation is bad for a person, especially his age. Along with that, well, Midoriya was actually adopted, or at least taken care of by Mitsuki. Since, well, the boy, if he goes into a foster care home, it would not be good for him. He's already suffered through enough, and being in foster care isn't easy for a child. So they took him on. Now, Midoriya was hesitant to simply even allow them around him. He didn't want them to get hurt. He began to start wondering if something was up with his quirk. But that thought quickly passed. And eventually, he was at least taken to their home and given a room. And he began to stay with them. But he is still unaware as to his true nature. Now, with that being said, I do hope you guys enjoyed. And have an amazing day. I'll catch you guys in the next part.